This is Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in the Coachella Valley today, and we are joined by Geoff Kors. He is a councilman in the city of Palm Springs, which isn't sure if it's a sanctuary city or not. A lot of that's because we don't know what a sanctuary city is. Correct. But talk us through that.
And there really is no legal definition of a sanctuary city. You know, Palm Springs Police Department has policies in place where they don't ask people about their immigration status. And our police chief, Brian Reyes, has explained why that's so important.
And let's really talk that through.
Sure.
Because I think, you know, when you hear the word sanctuary, some may think that means if you commit a crime, you can go to a sanctuary city and be safe. That's not what a sanctuary city is.
No, of course not. But there are people who do have that misunderstanding.
Right.
And that sort of comes from a history of sanctuary,
right,
that goes back to churches.
Right. And so the police chief would say,
what our policy is if we interact with someone, whether it's a witness or someone reporting a crime or someone we arrest, we don't ask them their immigration status because it's not something the city does.
But as I understand it, there's an even more pragmatic reason.
Of course. And there are several pragmatic reasons, right? One, you want your residents to know that your police department is there to protect them. And you don't want people to be fearful of going to the police. Because if that happens, people don't report crimes. People won't be witnesses in crimes because they're worried that they may be asked their immigration status and it can impact them.
And what's even more interesting about that line of reasoning is that even if that individual is documented, they're here legally, there's a fear that, oh, they may then ask about my mother, or they may find out that my girlfriend is not documented.
Yes.
There's a general fear of interaction with anything governmental.
Right. And of course, we don't want our police stopping and questioning people based on their ethnicity. That would be wrong. It would be unconstitutional. So we already have good policies in place, but I'm working on drafting an ordinance to actually put those into the law in Palm Springs that would simply say that no personnel or officials in the city of Palm Springs will ask people about their immigration status, their religion, their sexual orientation, their race, because none of those are relevant. Now, occasionally you have to ask for documentation such as an employment, and of course we'll have exceptions like that. We're also going to put in this ordinance that there's no discrimination against any of these groups of people in Palm Springs, including based on immigration status, and that there's no profiling of people. And our police chief is totally supportive. I've met with him to discuss this. We have such a wonderful police department in Palm Springs who works with the community, and having that trust is critical in our city.
And what's so interesting is, you know, with the new administration in Washington, there's all these discussions about we're going to defund sanctuary cities because there's an anger coming out of Washington, at least the administration, that these cities won't provide immigration information. But the reality is, it's really counties that are more on the front line. Correct. Because it's counties that are dealing with criminal justice. I mean, I know you may have your own police department, but then you hand them over to the county for prosecution.
Correct. The only crimes that are prosecuted are Palm Springs misdemeanors.
Right.
Everything else is turned over to the county. So there's absolutely no reason the police would be asking these questions. And we want everyone to feel that they're safe in our city.
But along those lines, the new president has been very clear. He has issued an executive order which says that if a city is sanctuary, and he uses a definition based upon some federal statute, that he wants to withhold all federal funds. That could be problematic. Is it worth going to the mat on this question? Aside from whether he can do it, we'll get there.
Right, okay.
But aside, whether he can do it, but talk to me.
You know, as a city official, our job is to make sure our residents are protected and that our city's safe, and we're going to do that. And we have policies in place, and we're just going to make sure people know about them.
But could one argue, look, this is a country of laws, and if someone's here and they shouldn't be, why shouldn't a city help out the federal enforcement agency that's looking to remove folks that shouldn't be here?
You know, right now, we use, I don't know, it's close to 50% of our budget is on public safety. We are working hard to recruit more police officers. We want our police officers making sure our public is safe. We want police officers to be dealing with speeding drivers and drunk drivers. We want our police officers to be dealing with property crimes. It's not our job to do the federal government's job.
But if, for example,
Sure.
in San Francisco, they are very clear. They will not interact with federal enforcement officials, immigration officials. But would it be so wrong if somehow a police officer became aware that someone was here and they were undocumented, that they should pass off that information?
You know, in our city, we want our residents to feel safe and protected. And if our police officers were seeking that information, we have a lot of residents who wouldn't report crimes against them. They become victims of crimes. They wouldn't be witnesses. They wouldn't be willing to come forward. That's not good for our city. It's not good for public safety. And that's why our police chief feels so strongly that we shouldn't be asking about immigration status, and I fully support him in that.
So let's talk through the president's desire, which is defunding. Walk me through this. You'll appreciate this, hopefully. As a lawyer yourself, I used to be a lawyer. You know, in the 60s, when President Johnson wanted to convince southern school districts to desegregate, he said, you desegregate. If you don't, we'll withhold federal education dollars. Arguably, President Trump could say the same. You provide us immigration information. If not, we'll withhold all dollars and/or law enforcement dollars.
Well, there's a big difference here. The Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional to have segregated schools. That was the law of the land as determined by the Supreme Court. So schools that weren't doing that were violating federal law. There is no federal law that says we need to ask people about their immigration status. And President Trump, despite his obviously thinking otherwise, doesn't get to act by unilateral decision. There's a process. If he wants to go to Congress and pass a law, and that'll get challenged in court, which Governor Brown has said he would do, and the Supreme Court rules, then we know the law of the land. But he doesn't, one person doesn't get to do that. That's not what our democracy is about.
I want to take it further since you are a lawyer. You may remember a few years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that under the Affordable Care Act, the federal government could not force states to expand Medicaid under threat of removing federal funds.
Right.
Could that argument help your position? President Trump cannot force you to interact with federal immigration officers at threat or desire to remove federal funds.
Absolutely. That is a key Supreme Court precedent that will come up in this. And of course, you know, President Trump ran saying states and local governments should get to make these decisions, not the federal government. He wanted less executive orders. He said Obama was breaking the law by issuing them, yet he's issued more in the first 2 weeks than any president in history. So if you look at it, you know, this is a state and local issue, and that's what he ran on. So he's being very hypocritical, of course, as well.
How does this end in your mind? Where does this go? How far does the fight last? How long does it last?
Look, ultimately, everyone wants the country to succeed and wants everyone to do well, and that's what should matter. And we have 3 branches of government, and they're going to have to figure out how to work together. And of course, ultimately, the Supreme Court is the final authority. That's how our system has worked for over 200 years and needs to continue to work.
But does California take the role that Texas took under the Obama years? Is that what needs to happen? California needs to be the foil?
Well, I think California and other states are going to do what they can to protect their citizens, and sometimes that will mean suing the federal government. Texas did that under Obama, and they have the right to do that just like California does. That's why we have a system of checks and balances. That's why we have 3 branches of government. And that's why we have a Supreme Court that even when you disagree with it overwhelmingly, and lots of people do in many decisions, everyone has followed it because we have set up a system that says those 9 judges who are there for life get to make the final decision.
He's Geoff Kors. He is a councilman in the beautiful city of Palm Springs, California. My name is Brett Pomerance. We're in the Coachella Valley today, and we thank you for joining us on Local Edition.